Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
Hey all, welcome to the Touch MBA podcast. I'm really excited to share a very unique perspective on this week's show. Samuel Adeoye is from Nigeria, and he has an amazing story to tell about applying to over 15 MBA programs over 2 years and getting full scholarships, getting fully funded at 8 of them. How was he able to do this, and what has he learned from his application journey from Nigeria to now Vancouver, Canada, where he is currently attending the UBC Sauder School of Business MBA program? I think that this interview will really change your mindset and how you think about applying to business school. Certainly, you'll learn the importance of building relationships while applying to business school, because this whole process can be very intimidating. And that's, building relationships with not only admissions officers, but fellow applicants, organizations that exist to help applicants to graduate schools, recruiters, and just also thinking bigger about how your journey could help others from your community. Samuel makes a very clear distinction between getting admissions and getting funded, and even getting visas, which are two completely different things, and quite frankly, a problem for many lower income applicants from developing nations. So for those of you who are concerned about not only getting admissions, but perhaps giving yourself the best chance of getting funding, this episode is for you, and I'm really excited to share it with you. Remember that you can get free school selection help at touchmba.com. That's how we're trying to make a dent in this whole B-School application process. And do also check out Samuel's really interesting podcast. It's called LanePod, and its target audience is lower income applicants applying to top business schools. And I really think he does an excellent job, and I'm happy to direct people to that podcast because I think he has a lot of fantastic content there. And he's doing some really interesting work with his organization called City of Lane, which we will dive into as well in this episode. Let's get straight to my conversation with Samuel. Here we go. I'm thrilled to interview our next guest because he's a fellow podcaster. He has an amazing podcast at LanePod. And I heard 5 minutes of one of his shows, his last episode, and immediately I thought, I need to get Samuel on the Touch MBA podcast. So Samuel Adeoye, welcome to the Touch MBA podcast.
Hi, Darren, and thank you very much for inviting me. I think it's just kind words of you. The podcasting industry is quite large these days, so to be able to be recognized by you, especially due to the work you've done, is quite amazing to me. And not many people get my surname at the first attempt, so kudos in trying to pronounce that.
It was, yeah, I felt the pressure rising before saying your last name. But yeah, so Samuel is a founder and managing partner of City of Lane, and we'll discuss more about what that is. He's also an MBA student right now at the UBC Sauder School of Business, based in Vancouver, Canada. So Samuel, could you just please tell us just a bit about yourself? What's your background? What were you doing before your MBA?
I think to understand who I am, you'd have to go to my background, my experience growing up in the western part of Nigeria. You see, I had an accountant mother and an accountant father and an entrepreneurial mother who we're constantly stuck in traffic. You would not believe the amount of hours people spend in traffic in Lagos, Nigeria. And so what that meant was we really never had time with them. I had four siblings I also had to take care of. But that pushed me into solving other people's problems without even thinking or knowing how to do it. So you learn how to do things on the fly. And that shaped my mentality to solving problems or to even doing anything at all. I just know that I can learn on the fly and improve. So it made sense at that point in time to want to solve the problem of traffic congestion. So whether it was majoring in transportation engineering at the University of Ibadan, arguably the best university in Nigeria, or whether it was launching a tech startup actually built around podcasting, where we're looking to help people stuck in traffic leverage the time in traffic for self-development, or whether it was moving to a design consulting firm, a Fortune 50 change the world company over Arup, and spending about 2 years there learning from the best. All of that was built around wanting to solve the problem of traffic congestion. But the funny thing I realized along that journey, you would see, is it's not a technical issue. It was more of a political, lack of a political will to solve certain infrastructural problem. So I thought to myself, what would I need to do to be able to equip myself even further with problem solving skills and also with the ability to draw decision makers to the table? So I decided, I bumped into consulting and I felt maybe that's the route to go in. So when I was going into an MBA program, maybe we'll talk about this later, I was well enlightened about what an MBA program is. Rankings wouldn't fall to me or push me to make decisions. I had a better understanding of what I wanted and what business schools could really provide me, stripping it off what you hear in the news and whatever marketing power they have. So, and we'll talk about, hopefully we'll talk about my experience at UBC, but the point I'm trying to make there is when I was going into my MBA program, I was looking at two things. I was either looking at consulting or consulting at the product level, which for me is product management. So it was amazing to find a role for my internship at Microsoft that merges both together and allows me to continue to explore how it really takes to lead people, influence people, and really understand that fine art of human relationship. I've talked a lot about that. I podcast, and that defines me to a very large extent. I play chess, and I love the beach. You may understand why I chose Vancouver of all cities to come to, but yeah, the beach has brought me here, as well as the natural things that are quite, rare to find in many other developed cities.
And I mean, where else were you looking? Because it sounds like you were pretty well researched on MBAs. I mean, was Canada kind of the big target for you, or were you looking at other countries, other programs?
It's quite interesting you're asking this question. I haven't told the story of my podcast, so I'm really thinking about whether to launch it actually on Darren's.
Let's go.
All right. So my MBA journey started from 2018. My first attempt was to 6 schools. I pretty much got into 2 out of them, didn't get into 4. I can give you the details of the school. I applied to MIT, Stanford, Ross, Rotman, and Maryland. I made a classical mistake for Maryland and I didn't get in. And then I got into Rotman. I got into Ross pretty much late. Rotman was quite interesting because I loved the interviewer. In fact, I chose the school because I really had a connection with my interviewer. But that didn't work out because I couldn't get my study permit. So I had to wait another year. And at that point in time, I was like, well, all this time around, I was doing it on my own. Where I worked, no one went to do an MBA, so it felt a little out of place for me to try to do that to many people. But somehow I bumped. Someone invited me. First of all, it was the U.S. U.S. opportunity funds for graduate students. That's the OFP program. that really got me to attend a tour. And then there was the tour MBA, the MBA African tour. I think it's the MBA tour, that's what it's called. So that exposed me to a larger set of schools. Also to the possibility that I could perhaps even lower the expense of applying to business schools. As you may know, a dollar is almost about 500 naira now. So I was spending nearly $500,000 in my first attempt to no avail. So this time around, I wanted to get as many application fee waivers as I could get, some things to just cut that cost. So you found schools that didn't require sending the original transcript before granting admission. That was an extra cost I could save. You found some schools that would not even press you for multiple recommendations. Just one or two is fine. That was an extra cost I could save. So to cut the long story short, I applied to 15 schools.
What?
Yeah.
You give me this whole talk about cutting costs, and then you tell me you apply to 15 schools.
Yes, I did.
All right.
I applied to 15 schools. 3 out of that was PhD.
Okay.
Because
yeah.
Opportunity Funds program led by an amazing lady, and Tishade, wouldn't let me go ahead without at least putting a PhD program.
That program, Opportunity Funds,
So,
is unique to Nigeria, or is that like a...
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Just want to clarify.
It's the U.S. Embassy program
Got it.
that allows that helps low-income African students get into postgraduate studies in the U.S. So yeah, that was all about it.
Okay, so you applied to 15 MBAs. Let's keep going with this.
15 schools, 12 MBA programs.
12 MBA programs, three PhDs, yes.
Yeah. Oh, well, the 12 MBA program is quite interesting. Like I said, I haven't told the story to a lot of people, so it's probably going to come as a shock. When I did so, I didn't start out wanting to apply to 12. I started out wanting to beat 6 because I knew that from my own experience, 6 schools could quickly turn to 1. I also came to the stark reality that I could not go to an MBA program without being fully funded. I didn't have that luxury of resources to attend to. Part of the reason why in my study permit was perhaps denied was I was also relying on loans. And if you're actually in Nigeria and coming out of Nigeria, you're not working for some companies, I would mention their names, you do the conversion to dollars, it's really bad. So I knew that I could not take any chances. The second thing is I'm also someone who tends to plan into the future. So I've got a 10-year plan, I've got my 20-year plan, maybe not as detailed, but I needed to go to business school at that point in time if I was going to achieve what I wanted to achieve in the next 10 years. So for me, there was an impending time clock I was working with that I knew I couldn't take any chances. So I was applying, started off with 6, realized that, again, I'm sure many schools don't like this, but realized that if I was systematic and strategic with my approach, some of the applications could overlap. So yes, I did apply to 12, but in the real sense of it, I only worked on, and this is not to, I'm being very careful because then I don't want to downplay the amount of work that admission officers put into the thought process to make schools stand out. It's a very rigorous process. I'm not sure many people can see the similarities that some people can see. The point was I was able to draw similarities between application. So I didn't work from attachment to schools. I walked back from it. I needed fully funded MBA program. I did not care whether it was a top 10 or top 50, top 20 or top whatever. I was only caring about my metrics. Could this school get me into where I wanted to get into? And that decided the schools I applied to.
And so where did you end up after, applying to those 15 programs? I mean,
Okay,
were you
so
considering alternatives to Sauder?
yes. To be honest, even at the point when I was applying, I was more focused on the US. My schools mostly in the US. It was just Sauder in Canada. I'd been beaten once by the embassy in Canada, so I did not want to have anything to do with the Canadian embassy anymore. Because I'd been denied once and I didn't want to take that risk again. So I was fully focused on the US. And also remember that I said I was also part of the OFP program by the US Embassy. So I was more US focused, more US centric. 11 of those schools were in the US. I didn't want to go to Europe because I just didn't like going to Europe for the MBA program, just personal preference. The US represented a bigger economy. It also represented an home for innovation and possibility, even though that will quickly change after the George Floyd and the whole issue that happened late 2020. But back to your question, out of those schools, I got fully funded, full tuition to 8 of those schools.
Wow.
And
That's incredible.
five out of that came with stipends as well. So it was really difficult bringing things down. As an admission officer, maybe I wouldn't mention the name of those schools, but those schools were, I remember one school reaching out to them and saying, hey, if you cannot increase this to at least full tuition, there's no way I can come. And I wasn't being proud or anything. I just knew I could not go without being fully funded. At the end of the day, it came down to one school, the school in Wild West. Very great offer I was given. I really wanted to go. Then COVID continued to play its thing. And, at that point in time, many business schools didn't know whether they were going to resume in person, start online. But I felt that a lot could have been done with respect to how they managed that process. And Sauder was really proactive. They wanted to make it work. So instead of fully deferring the whole program by 1 year, they were willing for international students to take the risk and start online. I also appreciated the amount of thinking and creativity that went into trying to adapt. So I felt like it was one quality I wanted to pick up from the system, the adaptability skills that they brought to life in terms of skimming things, splitting us into 2 cohorts, where some international students could start a little bit earlier than their domestic counterparts. So the thought process that went into that supported it. The second one was the MasterCard scholarship. And I don't know, I could pause here, or I could continue to talk about it. Oh, awesome. So the MasterCard scholarship was quite amazing because it's a fully comprehensive scholarship. I think that I tilted towards UBC also because of the amazing lady in charge of it, Rowan, at that point in time. Rowan was the director in charge of the MasterCard, and I felt more personalized conversation with her. This is someone who would call me up and just ask me generally about my well-being, how I'm doing. Even last year when I did decide to join the UBC program, or I was thinking through about it, and my visa was denied again. We were there together. She was really supportive. The whole MasterCard program was, but in particular, she represented everything I wanted to be in terms of being able to distinctively differentiate people and, speak to them and relate to them on a one-on-one and individual basis. And I really appreciated that. So it was exciting, turning down all the amazing offers that I did. When I did that, I did something which was quite interesting. I said that I was committed to making sure a lot of people apply to the schools. I wrote a very lengthy email because for me, it was more about doing this without burning bridges. I read this book. I can't remember the title right now, but talked about the lives of an admission officer, the amount of work that goes into deciding who comes and who doesn't come. The gatekeeper approach. Some of you would have to take the admission package home, walk overnight, walk through setting up those things. So I wanted to be respectful of that amount of time dedicated to my application. So I made a commitment to many of the schools saying that, I run a very small community of 22 people. I'm sure to get at least 5 of those people to apply. I didn't know that number was going to rise up to 730 a couple of months ago, and right now at 912 if we extend it to the people in the other network. Right now, the closer network is about 500, but a larger network of people is about 912 enthusiasts.
Wow. Okay. So I can't wait to talk more about that community because your situation is actually not unique. Living in Vietnam, I mean, I see it here that there's just incredibly bright, ambitious young people here that could easily get into top programs, but they can't afford it. And as you said in one of your podcast episodes, there's a difference between acceptance and getting funding. And so what I'd love to hear, because you can really speak to this audience right now, and I'll link to LanePod in the show notes because I'm sure you have great tips there. But could you share, a few tips you have for giving yourself the best chance of getting hopefully full funding, but as much funding as you can given your situation? I mean, and also given your results that you were able to accomplish.
I moved to Abuja because one night I just woke up and didn't like the trajectory of my job. I had mentors who was working with in Lagos at that point in time. I was falling sick from being stuck in traffic. And it was more of a deja vu moment because I lost my father at 13. And one thing that played a big role is work-life stress. And 80% of that was being stuck in traffic. We couldn't even get the ambulance to him in time. So I came to a stark realization that I didn't want to continue in that life. So I moved to Abuja. Abuja,
Abuja. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Moving to Abuja was the best decision I made because I had the support of my mentor, who was also my cousin and our husband. But all that, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things in there. Sometimes it comes to there's a level of self-awareness that you need if you're going to maximize opportunities around you. You can't stay in cloud nine. My first approach or my first attempt at getting into business school, I wasn't cloud nine. I wanted to do the Harvard. I had the glorious opportunity of spending $250 to be rejected by the Harvard School of Business. But coming back to your question, I will answer that question with a story. I remember when I first got my full tuition acceptance from the Boston University, and then I told my mentor at Education USA, again the U.S. Embassy program for opportunity funds for academically qualified, highly motivated, but low-income students in Nigeria. And then I told her I was excited. It was my first time I was being fully funded to anything. I mean, tuition completely, right? So I was excited and I walked up to her and she was like, Sam, so are you going to sleep under the bridge when you get to the US? Like, what's up with stipend? Because she knew my economic reality. I could not even afford anything at that point in time. But it wasn't as if I wasn't qualified enough. So I like to make a distinction between qualification and resources. Sometimes it can be qualified but not have the resources to really maximize that opportunity. And that for me captures some of the things that I was talking about, that it made me just come to the realization there's still much more to be done. So to the tip in that story, never do it alone. If I did not have someone like Auntie Sade, That's what we call her. If I did not have someone like Aunt Shelley to tell me that the possibility of full funding opportunities exist, I probably would have just accepted the first thing that came my way and would have lost out on many other opportunity. I didn't even know at that point in time that I could negotiate offer. Maybe I could have done that with Rothman. So never do it alone. Find people like you on that journey. And that's one thing we leverage in Lane, the power of community. If you can't find anybody, create one. When you're done maximizing the opportunity, create one still and let other people have access to that opportunity. That would be my biggest tip for anybody. Just don't do it alone. It's too stressful to try and apply to the MBA program alone. People do, but not everyone, especially if you're not of high income background. You do need that support along the way. So things like applications fee waiver, access to practice materials. You may not even be able to afford tutors. You could find people to practice together with. That would be my biggest one. I can add one or two others, but that would be my biggest.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such great advice. And I mean, it's amazing what you've been able to do, right? Because you're applying to these elite business schools, you get in and then they're able to fully fund you. And as we know, like these MBA programs are so expensive. So maybe just one more tip in terms of positioning in your actual application, right? So you get that help from as many people as you can. You form those application communities and people who are in those communities. But in the actual positioning, right? What do you think about your positioning really helped you get more funding?
That's a very good question. I think it's the understanding that there's so much of ensuring that I'm getting into a room, but I'm also holding the door for other people to come in. It's thinking beyond just my immediate needs. Like I said, there's one thing we tell the community constantly. I've got 4 siblings, and I'm constantly thinking about how to make their lives easy. I grew up learning how to take care of them. I had an extended family that was super supportive, I must admit. But I've always grown with the understanding that it's not just about me. It's about the people where I come from. And I think that showed in my essay. I remember when one school I almost settled for it, giving me 70% tuition and no stipend. And then I wrote an essay saying, hey, these are the 5 things I bring to your program. One, I think the power of my voice through podcasting is something that could be a great addition. But most importantly, I have a community of people who are 10 times smarter than I am. And I'm really serious, they are smarter than I am. That I can convince to be a part of the project you're building. And that for me, right off the bat, the admission officer responded she was going to get back to me, speak to the committee. And right off the bat, I was fully funded in that program. My tuition coverage was increased. The stipend I was also getting was increased as well. That would be one. The other thing was just making sure I wasn't shutting the door on others. You can think about how much relationship. I took a very personal approach to getting my admission. I knew every single admission officer right off the way, even before I applied. So I had built a relationship with them. And I didn't want them to feel deceived in any way, even though I had people who said, oh, well, they're used to that kind of thing every single time. But I wanted to say, hey, in spite of my decision to turn down this offer, I want to be in your network. I appreciate the time and effort you put into this. And I'm making a commitment to being an ambassador of the program as we did. And that helped because at the end of the day, they all came back for our MBA tour, which brought about 12 admission officers to reaching out to more of our people at that point in time. And more of the people applied, and know a number of our community members who are now going to those schools right now. So it was more about taking that, and no one required me to do that, but it was a commitment I just made that if I cannot come, I'll make sure that the other people who are going to bring value to the program can attend. Maybe not now, but in the following year.
Yeah. There's so much to that strategy that I love, and that more importantly is authentic to who you are and what you're trying to do. And I'm sure that's something that the admissions officers could feel, right? Because anyone can say, I'm going to give back to the, where I came from, my community, but it's really shown in your track record and what you're doing at LanePod. So let's talk about that. All right. So tell me about City of Lane, why you started this. I mean, you threw out some numbers about your amazing growth, which is great. It sounds like you guys are gaining some traction, in terms of your mission. But yeah, just let our audience know about City of Lane and what you're doing there.
Thank you. There were two key problems I found when I was trying to apply to an MBA program. One, it was exclusive. So if you were not in the big four, the MBBs, you really didn't see the value of an MBA. If you were in other industry, you would think more of a master's and PhD. Now, when you think of an MBA, you think about business administration. And where I come from, business administration isn't exactly respected on the same front as an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, and things like that. So we had the society place certain exclusivity on the MBA program. On top of that, it's super expensive as well. So the price tag would prevent people from really thinking about applying in the first place. So we wanted to lower the barrier to entry for great minds. And this is a model that Education USA, the Opportunity Fund program, started. I was the odd one out in the program. People took chances on me, like, okay, he has an engineering background, is going for an MBA. How is that going to work? So someone took a chance and got me accepted into the program, saying, we're taking a chance in you. But that just began to open my eyes to there's really so much we can do about making sure that it's not just about master's degree, but also about this leadership course. The second reason why we started Lane is thinking about the future of Africa. What is happening around? We know right now we're seeing events in South Africa. The gap between the rich and the poor just gets widened, and COVID has helped to even widen that, amplify that in many ways. The future of Africa will take a long time to build, but when that time comes, a lot of people need to be ready. A lot of people need to be prepared. And what is a better way to prepare people for greater leadership roles than the MBA program? The MBA program is known to churn out leaders of not just businesses, of not just Fortune 500 companies, but also organizations. There's a way of thinking that is different when you go through the MBA program as against any other program. So we wanted to use that opportunity to build leaders. And that really formed why we started Lane. So we are a community of MBA students, enthusiasts, and alumni who are looking to leverage the MBA for a more politically and economically inclusive Africa. We're looking to build that sense of not paying forward, but paying backwards. The model we deploy is we don't charge for admission fees consulting. All of our guests don't charge to say yes to join us. I remember reaching out to an admission officer and was like, how much are we asking for? And we say, you know what, for now, we're not asking for anything. Just give these people application fee waivers. Get the chance to read their story, first of all, and don't let that money prevent you from getting that opportunity to speak to them. And so that's what we're trying to do, leveraging that power of community to lower the barrier of entry for many amazing and great minds.
And what is
we're open.
Yep.
Yeah. Please. Yeah, and we're hoping that model catches on in terms of the people who get this opportunity also think about those in the community and support them as well. So, for instance, there are about, at our last count, about 71 people who are now in MBA programs across board. And our new version of webinars are people who were on the other side, who were in the community and just got admitted. So that model of making sure that the fee you would have deposited, you may not even have that money in the first place, but if you did, you would have given to an admission consultant. You can take that resources in terms of your time and effort and look back and make sure that other people can have that so they can be where you are.
Yes. And what does Lane stand for? I love the story behind that. So it's kind of a
That's interesting.
softball question, but yeah, please.
Yeah, it's funny. We were just brainstorming about the idea. I didn't like any name that included association of X, Y, and Z. I just didn't like the concept of these really long names. So we wanted something that was a bit startup-like. In my past life, I spent 2 years as a tech startup founder. So I wanted a name that could have that feel. So we're brainstorming all sorts of names that could make sense. And Lane stock, we add this, there's some kind of creative way to approaching it. We had so many ideas, we brainstormed, and then it came down to Light Africa Network. So L for Light, A for Africa, and E for Network. And that came together as Lane. We see ourselves more as a city of Lane because we want to be a virtual city that cuts across different nations. So we see that you come into Lane, you're like a newborn baby when you become a member. As you grow up, as a child, when you're 18, you need to start paying tax. We're hoping that as our members grow up and they start to earn more money, they think about supporting us even more financially. And, as you grow older, you start working, you need a support system. We want to be there as well. We want to be there throughout the whole life cycle, if I could use that word, of our members. And right now, we're around people who are at my level who are currently in MBA programs and doing internships right now.
I think it's just a really exciting model and organization. And I also think there needs to be more of this sort of thing in today's world where it's about interdependence, like this idea, right, as you say, that it's a virtual city and you guys are all coming together, which can be seen as a competitive thing because you're, applying to the same schools and so forth, but you're there to help each other out through the process, to give back, as you say. And, just to give our listeners an idea, I saw on one of your LinkedIn posts, last week you guys had MBA admissions, experience sharing, CV editing, cyber stalking, and recommendations and recruiting for consulting companies sharing, etc. So these are like the types of activities that are going on in your organization. So congrats on starting that. And yeah, I do hope that you guys continue to grow and further that mission. And, maybe this can be something done in Southeast Asia too. I mean, there are versions of this here, but they tend to be a bit more segregated, I'd say.
Right.
But
yeah, go ahead, please.
No, that's all.
No, and to think about competitiveness, what competition sets into play when there is a limited resources mentality, or the resources are truly limited. One thing we're also trying to disabuse people of is there's much more to the MBA experience than the 10 business schools we know about. There are top 100 schools. There are thousands of schools in the US. There are even more schools in Europe. There's even more schools you said there's schools in Canada, there's schools in. Of course, it's not a sustainable model when you're constantly getting people out, but sometimes you have to leave the system and thinking that created the problem in the first place to be able to solve it. So maybe our long-term goal is trying to go back to Africa and develop the business schools. But first of all, we must be able to take people out. So when we talk to people, we try to convince them to apply to a wide stretch of schools, so that we don't feel that sense of competitiveness. And that's one thing we're doing, disabusing people of the mind that you have to go to an Harvard to make sense out of your life. I was fully disabused of that thinking when I finally had to select schools. I also want to just acknowledge the thinking about virtual city concept really doesn't come from me, or it came from Michael Boric. I can't pronounce his surname really well, but he's a director at Firms Consulting, and it was just talking about the Singapore model and how that has influenced the businesses that he runs. It's Firms Consulting, just firm FIRMS and consulting, and the director there. And that thinking, just listening to his podcast, his training material, just helped me see how we could bring that concept back to what we do at Lane.
Well, one of the huge points of Touch MBA, what I'm trying to do is, building up that self-awareness among applicants it's hard because you haven't gone through the stage of getting your MBA and, doing what you're doing post MBA, but to try your best at least to really know what you want out of the experience. I know that's very cliched advice, but like you said, when you knew what you wanted, you were able to work backwards. You were able to apply to 15 schools, which is pretty crazy. But, you had to stick with your guns in the idea of, this is what I want out of the MBA experience. And then you're happy with your choices now, right? But if you don't have that mindset, then it's, okay, I got to go to Stanford or Harvard, or it's a bust. Right? Which is, I think, kind of ridiculous. But Samuel, we only have, we might have to record another one. Because we haven't even gotten to, your experience at Sauder. But maybe I could just ask one or two questions there. You spent tremendous resources in applying to MBA programs, getting to know them, building relationships with people throughout all these MBA programs. But now that you're in one, and in this crazy, crazy time of COVID, of course, I'm just curious to know, what has really surprised you, if anything, about your experience, and this can be, it has to be contextualized to Sauder, but I'm really curious about that. And then, first that question, and then one more.
It's how important work experience is. People tend to want to rush their lives. If I had joined the MBA program a year ago, I would not have been able to maximize the opportunity around me. A large chunk of what we do at Sauder, it's case-based. You'd be shocked at the number of cases we do. And they make it a little bit harder. You have to do those cases with people. You can't just take the case and break it down yourself and work at your own timing. You have to work at the timing of different people. And you'd be shocked at how similar and different we are at the same time. I can't explain it. We're similar in many ways, but yet in that similarity, we're so different. And being able to just take a step backward and understand and try and contextualize where people are coming from is one. The second thing that is quite amazing is just illuminating how much good video conferencing has done to the MBA experience and how much it could still be improved upon. I had the opportunity to meet many of my classmates, and one of the inside jokes we have is how people didn't meet our IT requirements. Like we sit down, people are looking right up. You think people are way taller than they are, and they're not. Yeah, and they're people who you think are not fun, just because of how they talk and Zoom, and you realize that these people are fun. They're people you formed context about that are not just true. So when you come in person, the online MBA experience really cannot replace the real life experience. And I'm shocked at how much different that is. Take, for instance, in Africa, a lot of our communication is through our whole body. I could be screaming on the top of my voice, and you'll be comfortable with that because everything about my body says I'm calm. Right. But if I'm screaming on screen, my colleagues would be scared what's going on with Sam. So it's all just nuances that
Wow. Mm.
we think we've missed out due to COVID.
I mean, just quickly, how much of your experience has been online versus offline, like percentage wise so far? So you started in January, it's now July.
It's now July. It's still online.
So it's been online the whole time.
The whole time. The whole
my
time.
gosh.
Four of that month I spent in Nigeria.
Wow.
Didn't knowing whether I was going to join the MBA.
This is a wrinkle.
know.
Wait, what do you
Yeah.
mean you didn't know? But you already started it. Oh, you mean you didn't know if you would come to Canada?
Yeah, getting admission and getting your study permit or your visa are two different things.
Okay.
So I didn't know if I was going to get it. But that's one thing I say. The program was really thoughtful in how to accommodate each individual's unique cases. A whole lot of us had to start. I wasn't the only one. A lot of us had to start from outside Canada. And it was a big risk that we were taking, and the school was taking alongside with us. It's good news because a whole lot of us are now in Canada, but thinking about it, it was crazy. Waking up around 8 a.m., waking up about 5 p.m. in the evening, doing classes about 2 a.m. in the morning, trying to catch up with group work. It was stressful, but I appreciate how much thinking the school put into it.
Yes. Oh man, that's a whole nother conversation about visas and how that works. But okay, let me cut to my last question for you, Samuel. It's just about the recruiting, right? Because you're online, you're in Canada, but you're online. And I saw that you got that internship with Microsoft, which sounds really amazing. But how was that facilitated? And yeah, I mean, just what tips do you have to share in terms of expectations for applicants who might have to be doing virtual recruiting? That's a big question, but yeah.
As an international student, you need to think carefully about the companies you're applying to. Culture should be more important than money. The kind of support I received from Microsoft is amazing. Even before that, Samantha Tinline is my manager, and she took. You can't get the amount of. So, for instance, my study permit was also processed. My work permit was also processed by Microsoft while I was in Nigeria. The school did an amazing job. Massacre did an amazing job, but I also got a very strong support from Microsoft as well. They're a very large company, so they were willing to walk that journey with me. But back to your question about recruiting, because I'd spent so much time learning about the recruiting process, learning about the MBA, I'd taken numerous courses from firms consulting with respect to polishing my resume, preparing for interviews, especially in the consulting space. I was well prepared. Many of the schools that reached out had spoken to some of the coaches. They had given me advice, I developed relationship with them. So I'd spent 1 year trying to offload some of the work I'd been doing in the MBA program. So when I joined in January, I know I received my offer within 1 month of starting the MBA program. I didn't have to start reviewing my resumes like my colleagues were. My cover letter was pretty much almost there. I did receive amazing feedback from the SCMP as well as the RHL, the Career Center at school. But I pretty much knew what I wanted. I knew how I needed to customize my resume to the job description. We all like to think that the things we do are contributing and maybe oblivious of other factors that Microsoft are taking into consideration. But these are the things that I think I did and may have played a good role in getting the opportunity I got.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like all the practice and preparation, really helped you get that jump on the process. All right, Samuel, it's been a lot of fun doing this. I do want to get you on the hook and get you back on the show for part 2 because I have a lot more questions for you, and maybe you're going to ripen even further after going through more of the program. So can I get you to come back on the show?
I'm fine,
half a year?
Darren.
Okay. See,
I'm down for
I'm
it.
doing this publicly. This is part of my tactics. So, yeah, we'll get you back on the show. I also want to hear about what you're looking to do in 10, 20 years. That's one of the questions I have for you as well on the next show. So stay tuned. Samuel, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I'm sure this will really share a unique perspective on the application process and how to think about it and continue the good work you're doing with Lane, for sure.
Thank you very much. That goes to the team right now. They're doing
Yeah.
an amazing job and not me.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your #1 school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch